Although we may not be aware of it, everyone is potentially afraid of you and me. That's right. But that can't be the case, can it? Who'd ever be afraid of you or me? Well, it turns out, in the right circumstances, just about anyone. There's growing evidence from social and evolutionary psychology that demonstrates not only this common caution we have around strangers, but also of people we know. Fear of others is merely the dark side of our extraordinary sociality, our joy in connecting with those around us, and our dependency on others to survive, let alone thrive. Now, I'd always been very aware of my own social uncertainties, but the evidence of this being true of just about everyone else led me to believe that in the right circumstances, others might be afraid of me. Ridiculous, I know, but the dissonant feeling in me led to an experiment to test the idea. I was, as a young man, working in a city office block. As is typical, the elevators in the morning were very busy around 8:30 a.m. You'd often have to squeeze in or wait for the next lift. To test this possibility that others might be apprehensive of me, I did the following. I bought a double scoop ice cream cone. Remember, this was first thing in the morning. I waited deliberately till I was the last person in the lift and the doors closed. Already I could feel people edging away from this strange young man with a breakfast ice cream, and the physical space opened up between me and them. Then, as I turned to face the people in the elevator, the space widened considerably. The nervousness in the lift was palpable, and I could see anxiety in people's eyes, especially after I offered them a lick of my ice cream. Now, some seemed amused, but most looked quite uncomfortable, and I swear some got off on floors well before their actual workplace. Now, of course, I know that people quite reasonably may have thought I was at best eccentric, more likely quite unhinged. Nonetheless, I made no threatening gestures. I did nothing but smile and calmly offer to share my ice cream. And I don't think I looked particularly scary. Anyway, something important shifted in me that day as I realised that others may often experience me quite differently than had assumed. Rather than experiencing me as benign or even somewhat shy, they may find me intimidating and therefore feel defensive or cautious until they have the confidence that I was indeed harmless. Unless otherwise reassured, we may naturally regard strangers as threatening. This is where our Stone Age wiring kicks in, where our utter dependence on each other for survival made us socially hypervigilant. This ancient wiring means we constantly scan for predictability and consistency in others. We want to be able to fit with them, socially speaking. We want to be somewhat on the same page. To illustrate what happens when there's a breakdown of this social predictability and reciprocity, let's look at the personality disorders, where a key diagnostic feature is that, quote, such people display a marked deviation from social norms. Now that sounds pretty innocuous, but it's definitely not experienced that way by most people when confronted by it. A common experience in the presence of someone with a personality disorder is for us to feel quite uncomfortable, nauseous, or even inexplicably afraid. This reveals just how much we depend on coordinated behaviours to feel okay and to feel socially relaxed. In short, when others are not singing from our hymn sheet, we find that lack of social coordination destabilising and quite uncomfortable. So, what are we to do with all of this? Well, a lesson I took from my elevator experience was that I was not at all alone in having background anxiety and cautiousness concerning others. This default is an important self-care mechanism wired into us all. So I'm more accepting within myself in having this kind of anxious vigilance. I also remind myself that the stakes for social misfires like this are generally really low in our modern world, it's rarely the case that my actual survival is at stake. Another implication is that one ought to actively set people at ease, soothing their natural self-protective discomfort. I didn't have the language for it at that time, all those years ago, but since then I've worked hard to replace this self-concern with compassion for others, especially when I realised we're all fundamentally in the same plight. We're all socially interdependent. Now, is it wrong to have this default caution, this background carefulness? No, by no means. You should not indiscriminately trust everyone. It's frequently prudent to assess their motives, their beliefs, and their personalities. Nonetheless, it's best to operate from a default of trust until proven otherwise, as generally trust begets trust. People are complex, being both angels and devils. So we should appeal to the better angels of their nature. We should try to elicit the best from them. And of course, a good general rule is don't eat ice creams in elevators.